How does it usually go? At the beginning of communication, there's mutual interest between a man and a woman. Well, at least there has to be some level of interest, otherwise they wouldn't have met in the first place. From there, in most cases, you can observe one of two scenarios. The first is when the woman loses interest within just a couple of months or even weeks. In other words, very quickly. The second scenario is when the interaction develops into a relationship and the woman's loss of interest stretches out over years. A gradual decline in interest will happen one way or another, and that's completely normal. Interest tends to fade over time in any long-term interaction. There's just no getting around it. But there's a big difference between interest dropping from a 10 to an 8 or 7 on a 10-point scale over the course of a few years, and then staying there, versus what often happens. The man fails to maintain even the minimum level of interest in the woman's eyes. And over several years, that 10 drops all the way to a 0. So how can you avoid that outcome? Because there are real reasons this happens. Reasons you can influence. And that's what we'll talk about next. One of the reasons this happens is a lack of emotional adequacy in communication with a woman. By adequacy, I mean having a proportionate response to her actions. For example, when a man forgives betrayal, in my view, that's not an adequate response. I can't wrap my head around how someone could possibly forgive something like that. That kind of man clearly loves the woman unconditionally, despite her betrayal, disrespect, or whatever else. But on the flip side, it's just as inadequate when some men blow up over something trivial, like if a woman didn't put enough salt in the soup or any other small thing. Basically, some men are either impossibly accommodating or the complete opposite. They act like tyrants. And both of these extremes are examples of emotionally inadequate behavior in a man. Of course, this is assuming he actually wants a healthy relationship, and not whatever mess comes from those kinds of actions. The second reason is that a man puts the woman at the center of his life. When he starts seeing her, he might drop everything just to meet up. He begins spending less time with his friends and as much time with her as possible. He confesses his feelings too early. He tries to win her over with persuasion and gifts. And while at first, many women may go along with it and even enjoy that kind of attention, sooner rather than later, they usually get bored of it. Some women will just start ignoring the man because they've lost interest. And most of the time, the relationship never even gets off the ground. If we're talking about cases where the interest fades within a relationship, there's another side to this. Let's say you always agree with her, even when you know she's wrong. You go along with decisions that are not in your best interest or even harmful to you, just to avoid conflict or avoid upsetting her. And if a disagreement does happen, you're always the first one to apologize and try to make peace, even if she's the one who was clearly in the wrong. Men who behave this way in relationships often had controlling mothers growing up. They were afraid of upsetting her, because it usually led to harsh punishment. But a man who either doesn't have or doesn't express his own opinion is someone many women simply can't fall in love with, and their interest in him fades quickly. A man like that is very easy to manipulate. And again, some women might actually like that kind of behavior at first. But very soon, they'll get tired of it, and they'll stop seeing him as a man altogether. Now let's talk about another reason why a woman can lose interest in a man during a relationship. Before getting into the relationship, the man had hobbies, passions, and a clear goal in life. He was a confident, charismatic guy who didn't give the woman the leading role in his world. But during the relationship, for one reason or another, he might lose interest in his passions or abandon his goals. That cool, vibrant guy she was originally drawn to turns into someone overly accommodating and easily manipulated. In other words, he becomes a completely different person. But the man she fell for was the old version of him. And in that case, I wouldn't be surprised at all if she started losing interest. I hope this video helps you to make the right decision. See you in the next video.